Hello, thank you all for joining us today. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. If you would like to ask a question on this Q&A session, you can use the Q&A button on your screen to type out your questions to our presenters at any time. Your camera and microphone are already turned off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. This is just one of many different sessions happening, so be sure to check out the full schedule at IACAC.org. This presentation is being recorded and will be available within about a week at that same website, IACAC.org. Now I'd like to turn it over to our presenters. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our session. It's not too early to think about transferring. My name is Samantha Miranda, and my co-host and I are so happy that you joined us here tonight. So we'll go ahead and start by introducing who we have here tonight. We have four co-hosts, Nick DeFalco, who is the Director of Transfer Admission at North Central College, myself, Samantha Miranda, the Assistant Director of Transfer Admission at Illinois State University, Nick Sanders, the Associate Director of Admissions at Parkland College, and then Kristen Smogelski, the Dean of Enrollment Management at Parkland College. Among the four of us, as you can see here, we have representation from a community college and both a public and a private four-year institution. We will be focusing on these three main topics today: earning college credit in high school to two-year college to four-year college, resources and recommendations, and then myths about transferring. As high school juniors and seniors, we hope that these topics are pertinent to you as you consider taking dual credit in high school and or starting at a community college after graduating high school. With that, we'll go ahead and get started with earning college credit in high school. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Nick.
Good evening. I'm Nick Sanders. I work here at Parkland College. Want to really talk about dual credit and then also some benefits and considerations that students and parents should take when thinking about a dual credit course. So what is dual credit? You often hear that term thrown around by guidance counselors, community colleges, the four-year colleges, etc. And so what dual credit simply is simply a high school student who can take a college course that will go toward their high school diploma and toward their credential or academic degree at the college that they take those classes in or decide to transfer to. That's all dual credit is. And dual credit is a really popular trend, particularly in the last 15 years in our country, where it's really helped thousands of high school students all across the country really get some more educational opportunities to get a jump start to their college career academically. And so what I want to get to in the next slide is for some benefits and considerations that students and parents need to take when thinking about selecting a dual credit course. I want to just highlight some of these. The first thing I want to highlight is consider the modality of the course that you're taking, meaning is the class face-to-face, is it online, is it a hybrid course? One of the things that parents and students need to consider is that, for example, if your student does not drive or does not have a means of transportation, if they take a face-to-face class, that means somebody's responsible for getting that student to class, whether it's the student themselves or the parent. So for example, if a student has an art class from 6 to 7:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, somebody needs to help that student get to class. So that's some of the things you need to consider is you have to build that into your weekly family schedule. Another thing I'm gonna highlight on this slide is the prerequisites. Most classes at a community college require some type of prerequisite for students some prerequisite that students have to satisfy before they're allowed to register for the course. So there may be some type of assessment test over English, reading, or math to see if you test at a college level. Or sometimes instead of taking an assessment test, you may have to provide SAT or SAT test scores to get into that course. So when you're thinking about courses to take at a community college and you are shopping around, you want to really see what the prerequisites are for the course and making sure that the student can can meet the prerequisites to get into that course. And sometimes also too, there's a fee associated with taking the assessment test, so you need to be aware of that as well. And then the last thing I would suggest to parents and students is talk to your destination school about the admission process and how, if you have college credit, how that affects your admission criteria. Does it change it? Do you get considered a transfer student or an incoming freshman? Does it change your eligibility for incoming freshman scholarships? Does it change your ability to stay in housing or not have to stay in housing? Those types of things. So those are all conversations that parents and students need to have with their school before they start that process. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Smigelski, who will talk about our next topic here on our presentation.
Thanks, Nick. And good evening, everybody. Again, I'm Kristen, Dean of Enrollment Management, also at Parkland College. So thanks for joining us tonight. So now that you've learned more about earning college credit while you're in high school, we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means later on. So the high school to 2-year college transition and then on to the 4-year. So what I'll do is I'll cover some resources and recommendations for things that you can consider now. Because the more information I think you have up front, then the better that experience will be for you. So definitely some of the first things to do is just look at your resources, and your high school counselor is a wonderful resource for you. Some high schools have, you might have a guidance counselor you work with, or possibly your own career center. And although visiting your counselor now or your career center now may look a little different, especially if you're not physically in school, but really most of the resources that 2-year and 4-year schools put out not only are virtual or electronic, but that your high school counselor has online resources for you too. So be sure to talk to your counselor, make an appointment, and kind of just get a sense for things that you should be thinking about now. Not only do they have information about colleges and universities, but they also have information, for example, maybe websites you can go to kind of explore what career fields are out there. So maybe you're, if you're completely undecided and you don't know what you want to do, by answering a series of questions, it may lead you to a certain career that you possibly haven't even thought of. So definitely want to use that high school counselor. Checking out websites. So if you're looking at the community college website, for example, getting familiar with the admissions information, where to apply, any information that you might need to gather before you apply for admission, that should all be right there at your fingertips. And then of course, contact information, especially now with most, campuses having some remote work and some on campus, being able to figure out how to contact the community college to ask your questions and get those answered. And then depending upon the setup and the size of the school, it will kind of depend on how it's set up, but you definitely want to touch base with the admissions office, and then also like a counseling and advising office, which is where most of the academic advising takes place at a 2-year school. Admissions, because that's your gateway into the school, and how you'll apply and get admitted to the college, but then also counseling and advising, which is where you could learn a little bit more about what types of classes you could take and how that all fits into your grand plan of your goals that you want to achieve at the community college, but also your transfer goals as well. And keep in mind that the community college, it's not just about, it's not a one size fits all. So it's not like everybody who goes to a 2-year is automatically going to stay for 2 years, get their associates, and then transfer on. We have many students who will come for just a year and then transfer on. Some students who will come complete a very specific career path and then do something else. So I think exploring the community college and doing that through the website and talking to the admissions office will really help you hone in on how attending a 2-year can help you reach your goals. And then also talking to transfer counselors at the admissions offices, any 4 years you're considering. And that might seem like a kind of early to do now, but it's really not too early, just because the more information you have up front about what types of classes you need to take, GPA and grades earned, or any other things about transferring to the 4-year, the more you learn about that up front, the better prepared you'll be when it actually comes time to make that transition. I think at 2-year schools, it might not be as well known that we do have campus visit programs and opportunities to come visit and tours even. Most of that now is virtual. which is completely fine though, because we can showcase our programs and have presentations, and even some 2 years are showing, have an actual virtual tour will show you around their school. So be sure to check out the website under visit information to learn about that. And the nice thing about virtual presentations is that typically they're recorded. So if you can't actually log in at the time live, to catch it live, you probably can go back and rewatch it when it's convenient for you. And then finally on this slide, we'll talk a little bit about transfer pathways and agreements. So there's, again, not a one size fits all for all of these. There are different variations and flavors of pathways and agreements, but just by putting that in your brain to remember to ask about pathways and agreement programs between a community college and a four-year is good, because chances are you're going to find something. And it may be come to the community college and stay there for a certain number of semesters or until you earn a certain number of credit hours. And then you're guaranteed admission as a transfer student to another institution. So that's just like one example of many possible examples, but it's always good to know, because if you have your end goal set on a particular four-year school, that's going to help solidify your decision to attend a community college, knowing that you'll be in good hands and that these institutions work very well with one another. So other questions to ask at the community college. And so again, these are just a few examples of things that we typically hear. And we kind of going back to the last point I talked about with agreements, but any sort of transfer relationship. And even if there's not an agreement, you could even just ask, how well do you work with such and such four-year institution? And they probably can tell you, oftentimes they can tell you how many students they've had transfer there, or if that's one of the main schools that their students transfer to. That's really good information to have up front, just to kind of understand what the familiarity is. Articulation agreement is another kind of flavor of transfer pathway that we've talked about, but basically that just means you're in good hands, you're taking classes at the community college that will transfer, and that you'll just kind of pick up where you left off at the four-year institution. So I think a lot of people think you have to repeat a lot of classes and retake classes, and that's not the case, because these are all transferable courses that have been worked out between the two institutions. As far as being accepted at, any credits being accepted, kind of the same thing, just we, in the state of Illinois, have a really nice and robust community college system that works very well with the public and private institutions. So we're fortunate in that we have that within our state, and that we work well together. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means later on in the presentation. Any grades that you need to get in at the four-year college, is there a certain GPA? Maybe it's a certain GPA required just to gain admission, but then there's another GPA in order to get into a specific program of study, because that could definitely vary. So make sure you ask those questions as well. And then also any sort of like graduation questions. And I think with the community college, the first thing is, are you going to get your associate's degree at the community college? And depending upon the four-year you're going to, you may or may not have to as part of their admission requirements. But that's definitely something to ask yourself, because it does give you a credential. It's something else to put down on a resume as experience. So even if you don't need it, it is one more credential that you have under your belt. So I highly recommend that you look at and talk to the community college about getting that degree. And then as far as maximum number of hours you can transfer, again, this is just a great question to ask, because there may be a cap of, we will only accept a certain number of credit hours from a community college, or some may be a little bit more open to how many hours you can have. But just knowing that ahead of time, and then understanding how that ties into your time to degree completion at the four years, all really important. So those are just some questions to consider. And yeah, and with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Nick.
All right, thanks, Kristen. So now you've made it to the two-year school. You're at the community college, and we need to continue that planning process. What comes next in your educational journey? Well, of course, planning ahead is an important part of that. You have to shop around early. Maybe there were schools that you were considering while you were in high school. You might want to go back and re-look at them, but through the lens this time as a transfer student. You have different needs and wants and concerns and questions that you might not have had coming in out of high school. Maybe previously you were looking at schools as an undecided student, and now you've just decided and declared what your major is going to be. Or like a lot of students, maybe you've switched majors or what your academic focus is going to be. Being able to go back and visit these schools, ask questions, is going to help you really solidify your search and where you want to spend your time. And just in general, attend transfer-specific visit programs to learn more about the transfer process at each individual institution you're considering. As Kristen mentioned, there's a lot of benefits to completing an associate's degree. By completing an Associates of Arts or an Associates of Science degree, which are by far the most common associate's degrees, you'll be completing a common set of general education courses, what are known as gen eds, that align with most four-year colleges. And as an added bonus, some colleges will even use your Associates of Arts or Associates of Science degree to automatically fulfill your gen eds at their institution. And making sure you know what transfers, making sure you're checking in. All of this, right, it comes back to the namesake of this presentation, which is it's never too early to start thinking about transferring. Meeting with your community college advisor and a transfer admission counselor at the four-year school you're considering will ensure you're, one, staying on track for graduation, two, taking transferable courses, and three, taking any prerequisite courses that might be needed for your major. Most schools have guides or tools to help see which classes transfer, but it's always really smart, always recommended to check in with these schools individually to confirm these assumptions that you might have about how your classes transfer. So let's debunk some myths about transferring. Myth number one, you go to a community college only if you're not accepted at a four-year college. Wrong. You go to community college for affordability, right? To save money. You go for academic flexibility, to explore different courses and majors and areas of study. For the academic rigor, to challenge yourself intellectually. School life balance. You go to community college to help you define a working balance for you between family, friends, work, extracurriculars, and school itself. And last, for personalized attention. Community colleges have small class sizes where you get a chance to know your professors on a first name basis and have an individualized approach to school that's going to really benefit you as you grow and develop as a young learner in your college career. Myth number two, transfer students can't get merit scholarships. Also incorrect. Transfer students can get scholarships. And there's a lot of different opportunities, and it's very individualized depending on which institution you're looking at. But in general, lots of schools give scholarships based on your GPA. They award scholarships based on your involvement. Maybe you're in an honors program at the school. Maybe you're in a different organization like Phi Theta Kappa, the National Honor Society for community college students, or other different areas that they might award one-off scholarships for participation. Maybe depending on your major, minor, or academic program, there's scholarships available. And lastly, maybe your parents are an alum or a brother or a family member, and there could be consideration for being a legacy or having that alumni connection that can get you additional financial aid. Myth number three, my courses may not transfer. False. Your courses will transfer. And there are tons of tools to ensure you're selecting transferable courses at a multitude of different institutions. The first one we'll talk about, the Illinois Articulation Initiative, or what we call IAI. All public schools in Illinois and most private schools participate in this agreement, which is a system of common course numbering, so you know exactly how each specific class you take will transfer at the participating institution. Number two is Transferology. This is a free online tool where you can enter in all your classes and see, one, which school is a good match for you based on how many credits they're accepting, or two, if you have a specific school you're interested in, you can enter in your classes and see exactly how they would transfer over to that institution. Three, as we've mentioned before, there's articulation agreements. And most colleges in Illinois, they have specific articulation agreements with community colleges like Parkland throughout the state. This is a great way to check to see how all the courses of that community college will transfer over to the four-year institution, hopefully taking the guesswork out of being a transfer student. And lastly, as we've mentioned several times throughout this presentation, there's a lot of benefits to the associate's degree. Completing that Associates of Arts or that Associates of Science is a great way to ensure you're taking transferable courses. They're going to be very similar to the common gen eds taken at a four-year college. Pass it over to Samantha for some more myth busting.
Thank you, Nick. Our next myth, I won't graduate on time. Starting at the community college, often I hear that students feel that they're not going to graduate on time because if they start at the community college, they're pushing off their four-year timeline, or their timeline's going to look different than students who start immediately at the four-year as a freshman. And this is simply not the case. You can graduate on time. If you know what you want to study and where you want to transfer to, you and your community college advisor can make a plan to ensure that what you're taking will transfer and it's the appropriate courses for your major. One part of my job is reviewing transfer plans sent to me from transfer students or community college advisors and confirming that the courses that the students are taking or planning to take are recommended for Illinois State and for the major that they plan to go into. I wanted to share also on this slide some data on transfer student success. The state of Illinois does an excellent job at ensuring the transferability of credit. As you heard from all three other co-hosts today, we have some pretty unique guarantees in the state of Illinois that most states don't offer. And that is one of many reasons that Illinois is #1 in the nation for bachelor degree completion of community college transfer students. And then here are some great examples of transfer student success among our four-year co-hosts today, so Illinois State and North Central. The graduation rate at our institution, so at ISU, 77% is our transfer graduation rate, and at North Central, 79%. Our transfer student retention rate is 87%, and then a significant percentage of our graduates each year are transfer students. And then I know for ISU, these success factors are 5 to 10% higher than our native students. Our next myth, I have no idea how to start the transfer process and there's no one to help me. That is wrong. As you've learned today in this presentation, there are so many people ready to help you transfer successfully. From your high school counselor to the community college admissions counselor to the four-year admissions counselor and your advisors at both institutions, our job is to help ensure a smooth transition from high school to community college to the four-year institution. Being proactive is really good. Asking questions often and making a plan is highly recommended. And then finally, you're not alone. Over 1/3 of college students in the United States are transfer students. And in Illinois alone, close to 50,000 students transfer every fall. And then for some fun, you're in good company when you transfer. We wanted to pull some famous celebrity transfer students who all started at a community college and transferred to a four-year institution. So you could be the next Morgan Freeman or Tom Hanks or Governor of California. They all started at the community college and transferred on to a four-year. We thought that'd be a really fun way to end the presentation today. Okay, with that, we're excited to open it up to you all. As it was shared in the beginning, we do have a Q&A button below. If you wanted to click on that and ask any questions that you have for our panelists, this is the time to do so, and we will answer you here live. So we'll wait for some questions to come in. There was one that was sent in during the presentation here, so I'll ask that first. And this looks like it is for the community college. So Kristen, can you answer this question for us? I know four-year colleges have clubs, but do community colleges have clubs or ways to get involved?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that for you. That's a great question, by the way, because I think that's a common one that we see at our visits. So short answer is yes, community colleges do offer clubs and organizations, which is a great way to get involved and connect with other students who have similar interests as you, which really helps kind of build that sense of community. It's, I think, particularly important at a community college to get involved in the organizations, because I think it's easy to fall into a habit of maybe you're living at home, you go to school and then you go home or you go to a job. And so maybe the only time you think you might be spending at the college is to go to class, when in fact, you want to get a lot out of your experience and help, kind of build that sense of community. So joining clubs will allow you to spend some extra time on campus and get to know other students. It's a great way to gain some leadership skills and a great resume builder. So yeah, definitely an opportunity there.
Thank you, Kristen. Nick, what's the difference between associate's degrees? Nick S. Clarifying. We have two Nicks.
Nick Sanders, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the difference between associate's degrees, plain and simple, there are some associate degrees called Associate of Applied Science, and those are typically some of your career technical fields. Those are typically those types of majors academic programs where some four-year schools will take them, some of them will not take some of those credit hours. And then you could do like an associate in science, which are typically transferable. Those are typically the ones that we suggest that for students who want to go on to a four-year degree that they pursue an associate in science, because those are highly transferable. All the public institutions in the state of Illinois have an agreement to take those classes and put that toward graduation requirements at their institutions. So that's the main difference without getting too technical.
Good summary. Kristen, another question for the 2-year. If I'm unsure what four-year college I'd like to attend, what's the best way to plan my courses at community college?
Yeah, that's another good question. It's probably pretty likely. I think a lot of students are undecided. So that's probably a pretty common situation students are in. I would start with, well, first of all, I think a lot of students don't think kind of outside the box of majors. Like you tend to think of like STEM and I want to be a lawyer or I want to be a doctor. So like maybe there's like 4 or 5 different career fields you think about, when in fact, when you start looking at a lot of four-year institutions and even community colleges, it's like your eyes are just opened with, oh, I didn't even know that was a career field. So you may, just through the natural process of exploring and taking different classes, find your way there. But I think the best thing to do is just take a variety of classes. You want to, I mean, if you're working towards a degree, an associate's degree, typically you need to take a variety of classes. It's not just going to be in one certain area. So don't be afraid to do that. Parkland specifically offers a general education certificate. So that's a nice way to take some gen eds and kind of get a nice variety of classes. And then probably what's going to happen is you'll be successful and really enjoy 1 or 2 classes in a particular area and decide to take more, and then possibly decide you want to major in that. So it's kind of a combination of just getting your feet wet, maybe taking something outside of what you might consider your comfort zone, but then doing some research at the 4-year to see what all those majors are that you may not even have thought about.
Thank you, Kristen. Nick, a question for the 4-year. What are some experiences that I'll be giving up if I don't start at the 4-year institution?
Nick Sanders or Nick Falco?
Nick DeFalco, my goodness, sorry.
Yeah, I don't think there's much, to be honest with you. Whether it's starting at the 4-year or the community college, as you heard from Kristen, you have access to clubs, activities, organizations, athletics, fine arts. There really is a robust offering of extracurricular and co-curricular activities. You might miss the housing component is maybe one difference between the 4-year and the community college, but there's housing available as a transfer student as you're coming in, whether it be after one semester or after an entire associate's degree, to still have that community and have that experience, having on-campus housing and being involved in that capacity.
Nick DeFalco, another question for you. How would you advise a high school senior who's unsure if they want to attend a community college or a 4-year? Should they apply to 4-year schools and then just wait to see? And then are there any financial aid differences between starting at a 4-year versus a 2-year?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's one that a lot of students and their parents have, especially if you're going through this search process for the first time. Maybe you're the oldest sibling in the family or a first generation student and your parents didn't go to college. I think it's common. A lot of people have this question. And I think hedge your bets, do your research. If there's four-year schools that you're interested in, go ahead and apply to them. And I think it's also important to apply to your local community college at the same time. It's good to have options and to see what's going to be the best fit for you, whether it be academically or financially, within your work-life balance, or logistically, as Nick Sanders mentioned, about having transportation back and forth, whether you're living on campus or commuting. And so I think it's good to apply to all the schools that you're interested in, but also make sure you apply to your local community college and really see, as you go through your checklist of what's important for you as a first-year student, as a freshman, and then making that decision between you and your family or whoever's going to help you going through that process.
Thank you, Nick. Nick Sanders, how do I know if I'm taking the right dual credit courses?
I think that's really individualistic. I think what I would always advise a student to do is to figure out what school they're thinking about transferring to and what academic program they're going to pursue. And then based on those two answers to those questions, I think that will shape the type of class that you want to take as a dual credit student. Another thing to kind of consider too is what you like academically. Are there subjects that you really enjoy? Like if you enjoy history or psychology, take those courses. Why not? Why not sit there in a college classroom, in a college environment, and learn about those types of things if you're really interested? So I wouldn't say there's an ironclad answer to that question, but I would definitely tell you consider school you're going to go to, academic program, and if those answers don't really matter to you, what are you interested in? And obviously, what I mentioned earlier, can you get to the class, prerequisites, those types of things.
And then Nick DeFalco, if I attend a community college for my first year or for the first 2 years, and then plan to transfer to a 4-year, will you still look at my test scores and my high school GPA?
Yeah, this one might not have a universal answer. I think in general, most colleges, especially in Illinois and universities, once you've accumulated a year of college credit, they're really only looking at your college GPA. But that's a great reason, again, to work with your community college advisor and stay in close contact with the transfer admission counselor, because every institution is different. I'm sure Samantha could have an example of what the requirement is at Illinois State, but I know at North Central, that once a student has accumulated 24 hours, so roughly 1 year of college credit, we no longer look at the high school GPA or the test scores. We're just looking at the college GPA.
Yes, Nick's absolutely right. Every 4 years is going to be a little different here. But in my experience, it's typically 24 to 30 credit hours established at the community college, and most 4-year institutions won't consider or require your high school test scores or GPA. ISU is the same as North Central. After 24 credit hours, so essentially 1 year, we would not look at your high school credentials for admission. And then I see one more question here. Can I attend a transfer information session at the 4-year if I'm still in high school? I'll go ahead and take that one. Absolutely. Yes, we welcome anyone who is considering transferring, whether they're in 8th grade, whether they're a senior, or whether they're at the community college, to come and learn more about the transfer process at the 4-year institution. No matter where you are in that range. So if you're thinking about it, most 4-year institutions have transfer information session options now virtually that you can learn more about being a transfer student at that institution. And then I think that's the last question I have here. So I'll go ahead and end with one final question. Is what's one piece of advice you have for high school seniors right now that you'd like to end with, the presentation with, that you recommend that they take advantage of now as a high school senior if they're considering transferring? We'll start maybe with Nick Sanders, then Kristen, then Nick DeFalco.
I was going to say ladies first. The one piece of advice I would give high school seniors is to really do your research, really make sure to see what college is a fit for you. Do not let a magazine or publication tell you where to go to school at. Take a visit, go around, ask people about the college and university, and then from there, make a good informed decision. Picking a college probably the top 3 decisions you're going to make in your life. One of those decisions you make a wrong one can really affect you years on down the line. So really take your time and make it.
sort of along the same vein, but kind of, I think what happens a lot is, you know, you might have a friend of a friend who had one experience and then a neighbor who had a different experience, and you have like all these people trying to give you advice on and whether they went through it or know somebody who went through it, and then you know you're left to like how you base your opinion on there. You know, are you basing that as fact or is it a myth? And so I think from our presentation and what Nick said, just go straight to the source. It's nice to get some opinions, especially if you're asking for opinions, but really to get like your actual facts about what it takes to transfer and what the process is going to look like, talk to the experts.
Great. And I think really continuing off that perfect segue is there are no dumb questions, and you can never ask too many questions. Literally, our whole job surrounds around helping you through this process. And as Samantha said, it doesn't matter what age you are or what part in the process. If you're just thinking, you're inquiring about what it might be like in 2 and 3 and 4 years to be a transfer student, ask the questions. We're here to help you every step of the way. You're never alone in it, and we're more than happy to give you resources, connect you with faculty or staff or other colleagues, other institutions. We really are a very collaborative career field, and we want to make sure we help you and your families be confident in your decision.
That was great advice. What a great way to end this presentation. Thank you all. Well, we have some advice for you in addition to all of that, which is if you have any questions, if you don't want to attend or you can't attend or you have no desire to attend any of our institutions, it doesn't matter. We still want you to utilize us. If you have any general transfer questions, we're here to help you. Our contact information is here on this slide. And as shared at the beginning, we'll have a recorded session up on the StriveScan website. So you'll be able to review this session or just get to this slide later on if you need to. And to end here, we hope you learned a lot about the benefits of transferring, and it's not nearly as scary of a process as you may have thought. Ask questions, advocate for yourself, and don't be afraid to, like Nick said, ask this question that you think is silly or dumb. A lot of people are thinking the same thing and wondering the same thing. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you all have a really good night.
Thank you, presenters, for that very informative session. And students, thank you for joining us. When you close this window, there'll be a link to a very quick 4-question survey. We'd appreciate any feedback you can provide. This was one of many sessions that have been hosted by Illinois ACAC. So be sure to sign up for additional sessions at iacac.org. In about a week, you'll be able to find this session's recording, as well as all of the other session recordings at iacac.org. Thank you for joining us, and I'm going to go ahead and end the session.